The story begins with a revelation that shatters Victoria's world. On a quiet morning, her phone buzzes with a message from her sister-in-law, Sarah. The words on the screen feel like a slap. "Why did you decide not to come to my wedding?" Victoria freezes. Her heart races, confusion flooding her mind. Not attend? She never even knew the date had been set. How could Sarah believe she had rejected such an important moment? That's when the truth begins to surface. Unbeknownst to her, Julian, her husband of 15 years, had spun a cruel story to his family. He painted Victoria as a woman consumed by her career, so obsessed with her work that she had chosen to cancel her own invitation to her sister-in-law's wedding. The betrayal is devastating. For years, Victoria had been the quiet pillar of the family, enduring the cutting remarks of her mother-in-law, Mrs. Thorne, who never missed a chance to remind her that a woman's place should be at home, not leading a business. Victoria had stayed silent, swallowing every slight, believing her marriage was still worth the struggle. But this lie, this carefully crafted narrative meant to erase her presence from a family celebration, felt different. It wasn't just an insult. It was a deliberate attempt to push her out, to diminish her role not only as a wife but as a sister, a daughter-in-law, and a woman who had given 15 years of her life to a marriage built on fragile trust. For the first time, Victoria begins to see the cracks she had ignored for too long. And with Sarah's wedding looming ahead, one question takes hold in her mind. If Julian can lie about this, what else has he been hiding? Behind the polished smiles at family dinners, Victoria carried a secret life, one of ambition, vision, and quiet triumph. Years earlier, after receiving a modest inheritance, she made a daring decision. While others expected her to settle into a comfortable domestic role, Victoria poured everything she had into building a dream, the Hope Boutique Hotel. From sleepless nights spent sketching designs on scrap paper to negotiating with banks for loans, Victoria fought for every brick, every wall, every detail. And slowly, the dream became real. The hotel blossomed into a symbol of elegance, attracting guests from across the city, and soon, Victoria was no longer just a wife in the shadows. She was a businesswoman, a leader, a creator of something lasting. But there was one condition. At Julian's urging, Victoria kept this empire hidden from his family. He insisted they wouldn't understand, that it would create unnecessary tension. Out of loyalty, she agreed. What she didn't realize was that her silence planted the first seeds of resentment. As the hotel's reputation grew, so did Julian's unease. In public, he smiled beside her. In private, his words grew sharper, his praise turning into criticism cloaked as jokes. He would sigh at her late nights, mock her for playing boss, and complain that her success made him feel small. Then came the deeper wound, the one Victoria never spoke of. For years, she carried the heavy burden of Julian's secret. He could not have children. Out of love, she protected his pride, never letting anyone suspect. But instead of gratitude, Julian twisted the truth. To his family, he whispered a different story. That Victoria refused motherhood, too obsessed with her empire to care about raising children. The lie cut deeper than any insult. While Victoria sacrificed her own image to shield her husband's dignity, he used that very sacrifice to tarnish her in the eyes of those she tried so hard to win over. And as the whispers of jealousy and blame grew louder, the cracks in their marriage widened. What once looked like a strong partnership was quietly collapsing under the weight of secrets, envy, and betrayal. Doubts gnawed at Victoria's mind after Sarah's shocking message. Something felt wrong, and she knew Julian's explanation could no longer be trusted. Determined to uncover the truth, she turned to the one person who had never failed her, her loyal assistant, Helen. With a steady voice, Victoria asked Helen to double-check the guest list and confirm the final arrangements for Sarah's wedding at the Hope Boutique Hotel. What? Helen found made her voice tremble over the phone. Julian hadn't simply forgotten to pass along the details. He had erased Victoria from the wedding entirely. Her name wasn't on the list. Her seat had been reassigned, and in its place appeared another, Claire Vance, a young and ambitious financial manager who had recently appeared in Julian's professional circle. Victoria's pulse quickened. She asked Helen to dig deeper, and soon the puzzle pieces fell into place. Julian had personally booked the bridal suite, the most luxurious room in Victoria's hotel, not for family, not for Sarah, but for Claire Vance. And he had shamelessly used the couple's joint credit card to do it. Still unconvinced, Victoria demanded proof. Within hours, Helen delivered it, security footage from the hotel's discreet cameras. The images were undeniable. Julian had been seen arriving late at night with Claire, guiding her through the lobby, stealing private moments behind closed doors. And this hadn't happened once, it was a pattern, repeated visits. Each one confirming what Victoria feared the most. Her hands shook as she scrolled through the footage, each frame tearing at the last threads of trust she had clung to. The betrayal was no longer whispers or suspicions. It was documented, undeniable, and happening under the very roof of the empire she had built with her own hands. What made it worse was the audacity. Julian hadn't just lied. He had taken the symbol of Victoria's life's work, the hotel she had poured her soul into, and turned it into the stage for his secret affair, for Victoria. The truth was clear. This was no accident, no mistake. It was a deliberate plan, executed with precision to humiliate her, to replace her, and to strip her of her place in the family. And as she stared at the damning evidence, Victoria knew the time for silence was over. The door creaked open late that evening. Julian stepped inside, his expression carefully arranged into one of weariness. He dropped his keys on the table and sighed. I need some space, he muttered, not meeting Victoria's eyes. I need time to think about us, about everything. But Victoria was no longer the quiet, obedient wife he thought she was. She had been waiting for this moment, the evidence clutched like a weapon in her hands. Space? Her voice was steady, cold. You mean space to sneak around with Claire Vance? To book the bridal suite at my hotel using our money? To erase me from Sarah's wedding as if I don't exist? Julian's head snapped up, his mask slipping. What are you talking about? He barked. But the tremor in his voice betrayed him. Victoria didn't flinch. She laid the photos, the receipts, and the security stills on the table. Each piece landed like a hammer blow. Don't bother lying. I have every detail, every visit, every charge, every stolen night you spent humiliating me under my own roof. Julian's face twisted, his composure shattering. Instead of shame, he lashed out. His voice rose, filled with bitterness. You've always overshadowed me, Victoria. You and your hotel, your so-called success. Do you know what it feels like to live as a shadow in my own marriage? To be treated like a failure? You made me feel like nothing, a man stripped of his worth. For a moment, the air was thick with his fury. But then Victoria stepped forward, her calmness cutting sharper than his rage. Your worth, she said quietly, her eyes locking onto his. Do you want to know what I've done to protect your worth? Her voice grew stronger with each word. I hid the truth about your infertility so you wouldn't feel less of a man. I endured your mother's contempt, the endless whispers that I wasn't enough. I paid off your mother's mortgage with my own earnings. I covered Michael's cancer treatments with my money, while you took the praise. I carried every burden in silence, and you dare tell me I made you feel small? Julian's mouth opened, but no words came. The walls he had built crumbled under the weight of her truth. For the first time in 15 years, Victoria wasn't pleading for understanding. She wasn't defending herself. She was standing tall, unmasking every lie, every injustice, every betrayal, and Julian, stripped of excuses, of pride, of the image he had crafted, stood speechless, exposed. This was no longer just a fight between husband and wife. This was a reckoning. Victoria no longer trembled with anger or grief. She moved like a strategist, precise and controlled, as if every step had been rehearsed for years. Julian thought he had stripped her of dignity, but in reality, he had freed her to reclaim her power. The first strike came swiftly. She phoned the hotel's front desk and spoke with the manager in a voice that brooked no argument. Suite 701, under Claire Vance's name? Cancel it, effective immediately. Mark it as a payment error, and reassign it. The manager hesitated for only a second before replying. Of course, Mrs. Thorne. Consider it done. Victoria smiled faintly. By the time Claire arrived expecting luxury, she would be escorted to an ordinary room. A small humiliation, but a powerful message. You are nothing in my world. The second strike cut even deeper. Within the hour, her attorney was on the line. I want every joint account frozen, she said coolly. File for divorce. Grounds? Adultery. I have evidence. Her lawyer, long familiar with her efficiency, simply replied, it will be done by morning. The third strike shattered what little pride Julian clung to. When he tried to protest, Victoria stood at the door of their home, her home. "You're leaving tonight," she told him firmly. "This house was bought with my money, before you ever put a ring on my finger. You have no claim here." "Not anymore." Julian's face flushed with rage, but for once, words failed him. He grabbed his coat and stormed out, reduced to a man with nowhere to go, and then came the final move, the Declaration of Independence. Victoria packed a single suitcase and drove to the Hope Boutique Hotel, her creation, her pride. Instead of slipping into grief, she ascended to the top, the presidential suite. The suite welcomed her like an old friend. The polished marble floors, the panoramic city view, the scent of fresh roses placed on the table by staff who revered her everything was a reflection of her strength. She poured herself a glass of champagne, letting the bubbles rise like her renewed spirit. For the first time in 15 years, Victoria wasn't surviving, she was thriving. Alone, but unbroken. Betrayed, but unshaken. As she stood on the balcony, the city glittering beneath her, she whispered to herself, "Let them plot, let them whisper. I hold the empire now, and I will never hand it over again." From the presidential suite, the crown jewel of her empire, Victoria became the silent architect of Sarah's wedding day. Every flower arrangement, every course on the menu, every flicker of candlelight was overseen under her watchful eye. This was more than an event. It was her declaration that, despite betrayal, she remained unshaken. Through the glass windows, she saw them arrive, Julian and Claire Vance. They walked in with smug confidence, expecting luxury, expecting the suite that Julian had so boldly reserved in her hotel. Instead, the front desk clerk politely informed them of a payment issue, guiding them toward a standard room. Claire's face darkened with fury, while Julian's jaw tightened in silent humiliation. From above, Victoria watched, her expression unreadable. The power shift was absolute. Later, her phone buzzed with a message. It was from Claire. "You think this is over? You won't stop me. I'll destroy everything you've built." Victoria read it once, then calmly typed her reply. "I won't ruin Sarah's wedding. But remember, your time will come. Actions have consequences." She hit send, set the phone down, and turned back toward the glowing ballroom below. As the music swelled and Sarah walked down the aisle, radiant in her gown, Victoria felt something stir in her chest, a rare warmth that had been missing for years. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about love, loyalty, and legacy. Sarah deserved happiness free from scandal, and Victoria would see to it that nothing tainted her special day. When Emily introduced her publicly as the sister who made all of this possible, the applause that followed wasn't just polite courtesy. It was genuine admiration. Guests turned their eyes toward Victoria, and in that moment, she wasn't the betrayed wife or the woman left in the shadows. She was the force behind the empire, the protector of family, the woman who refused to be erased. As the night drew to a close, Victoria returned to her suite. She stood on the balcony once more, overlooking the city lights that glittered like 1,000 promises. Julian and Claire might plot in the shadows, but their reach was short compared to the empire she commanded. She raised a glass of champagne to the night sky and whispered, "My future is mine. No one will ever take that away." And with that, she stepped into tomorrow not as a victim, but as a woman reborn.